Good evening and welcome to the East China School District Board of Education meeting for Monday, December 14th. It is now 6 o'clock and we will get started with a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance, please. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, hello everybody. The next item on our agenda is items of interest, recognition, and inquiry. Board of Education members, I just want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And does anybody else have anything? No? Okay, Mrs. Sibula?
Yes, good evening. Hello, everyone. I have two things tonight. The first is I want to thank President Jeannie Frank, Vice President Pat Beebuck for taking the time to put together 59 bags for teens in need for our students at both Marine City and St. Clair high schools and middle schools at this time of year when so much is needed by so many. Thank you for that, and those will get distributed in time for the holidays. And then I also just want to take a moment to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, a calm and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we spent a couple of days last week and this week getting bags ready for our Teens in Need program. That's our homeless and displaced students in our East China School District. And it's for the 2 middle schools and then the 3 high schools, Riverview East High School as well. So we appreciate all the donations from the community, especially this year, Riverside Theaters. They really stepped up and provided movie passes and free popcorn and pops. So I always want to give a shout out to Riverside Cinemas for helping us out with that. Did anybody else have anything? We're all set. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Before we move into approving that, though, we do need to amend the minutes from the November 23rd, 2020 regular meeting. So I do need a motion to amend those minutes to read as far as board members present. Lynn Griefor was not present at that meeting, so she would be listed as absent. So I need a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Support.
Any comments or questions? Oh, okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, so that motion carries, and then we can move on into approving the entire consent agenda, which will be the approval of those amended minutes, the approval of the payment of bills, the financial statement, and the schedule of investments. And we need a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Support.
Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carries. Okay, so moving on, our next item is recognition of persons wishing to address the board. This portion of the agenda is for citizens to address any questions or comments to the board. We don't have any callers this evening, I understand, but I do have one approved letter to read, so I'll go ahead and read that comment now. It was submitted by Nicole Dawson, and Nicole says to the board, has it been considered to have the youngest grades, kindergarten through 2nd grade, in the district return to in-person school? Due to the nature of this being such a crucial foundation of their education, where they are learning to read, write, and the basics of math, this would reduce the burden of contact tracing for the entire district, but still allow for in-person school for youngest learners. So the district's policy on this is Mrs. Sibula will reach back out to Mrs. Dawson and address her questions and concerns. So the next item on our agenda is our information and discussion items, and the first up on that list would be Tina with the 2020-21 budget revision.
Good evening, everyone. We are mid-year for the 2020-21 school year, and it's time for us to review our financial position. Detailed budgets were provided to you in your board packet for the general fund, cafeteria, latchkey, and student activity funds. But tonight's presentation is just a summary of the general fund. As you may recall, a mid-year budget amendment is necessary to the district because original budgets are developed in the prior April and May based on assumptions. Then in October and November, the state of Michigan has adopted its budget and its state revenue is identified. Student count occurs in October and pupil enrollment is official, and staffing changes and levels are all in place at that time. And you heard me say this several times, our budget is relative to students and staff. Student levels primarily determine our revenues, while staffing costs account for approximately 87% of our expenditures. So therefore, the district's job is to maintain a healthy fund balance by adjusting expenditures according to student levels and foundation allowance allocations. This amended budget differs from previous budgets in a few aspects. That because of the pandemic, our learning environment is very different from what we've known in the past. Our funding is a little bit different and our expenditures are also a little different. I want to begin tonight by just reminding us and looking back. So it gives us a good place on where to start looking at our current position. The later portion of last year, we were all placed in a stay-at-home order. Buildings were closed and instruction was transitioned to online. State funding did continue and the district continued to pay all district employees as they were working. In addition to that, we received some federal funding last year at $324,000 from the ESSER or the CARES Act. Although this funding was great and wonderful, and it was designed to provide relief for unanticipated costs associated with COVID, we weren't able to recognize those funds last year. They had to be recognized in this current 2021 year. So we're recognizing and utilizing them in this year. And so the district had the opportunity to build fund balances for protection against the uncertainty of how our future revenues or costs would be impacted. Originally, reductions of transportation, custodial services, substitute teaching, coaching costs. The fiscal year 1920 final budget anticipated an increase of fund balance levels by $877,000 and leaving us with a 12.08 fund balance level. But with all the uncertainty of the future state aid, we adopted an original budget for the 2021 that reflected a foundation allowance levels with a $650 per pupil reduction. Next. And then following the adoption of our final budget last year, the state of Michigan reported a drastic shortfall of revenues in anticipation of fiscal year 20 and 21 to be impacted. Then in August, MDE reduced our foundation allowance per pupil by $175. This equated to $697,000 for the district. And this is the main factor of why we missed our budget mark last year. Also in August, the district received federal corona relief funds of $1.4 million, which just like the ESSER or the CARES, it had to be recognized and used in fiscal year 20 and 21. Next. And here's the comparison of how we anticipated last year to actuals. So the same format of what you're familiar with. I like to provide final budget on the left and then the second column with the actuals, revenues and expenditures. The final budget was increasing fund balance by $877,000, leaving us with a $4.9 million fund balance and 12.08% of fund balance to budgeted expenditures. Now, after the state adjusted the foundation allowance and the district ended the year with $395,000 less revenues than we expected. And their expenditures were $103,000 more than what we anticipated. This resulted in revenues exceeding expenditures by $379,000. Thus, a lower fund balance of nearly $500,000 than what we thought, leaving us with $4.4 million instead of the anticipated $4.9 million. We ended with a final 10.82% fund balance to budget expenses. The important point with this is the difference in the ending fund balance levels. So the ending fund balance level is the beginning fund balance for the next budget cycle. And when you pass a budget, it's using that projected fund balance. And I'm going to tell you how this all plays in the next few slides. Next. So moving on to the current fiscal year. In September, the state of Michigan reported higher than expected revenue levels. And with that, foundation allowance levels were restored to previous levels, regaining the $175 per pupil reduction from last year. And then a SuperBlend-Pupil membership calculation was developed that would help stabilize state revenue for districts with declining enrollment. And we're going to look at this in greater depth in an upcoming slide. And the state also provided a one-time per pupil increase of $65. This equated to $259,000 for East China. Then in November, we returned back to virtual. All these changes, going back to in virtual, it's potential savings for us, transportation, purchase services, but I won't be reflecting them until we get to the final budget. Next. Okay, for comparison, I provided the major budget assumptions side by side of the current original budget and their proposed amended budget. So the original budget, the pupil enrollment was projecting a decrease of 113 students, but actual enrollment ended with a reduction of 168. That's additional 55 students that we lost than we anticipated. The foundation allowance, the original budget reflected a decrease $650 per pupil at an amount of $7,695. The amended budget, it has a restored foundation allowance at a per pupil amount of $8,345. The membership blend in the original budget, I used the traditional 10% of the prior spring count and 90% of the current fall count. The amended budget is reflecting the SuperBlend calculation. The foundation allowance funding amount was just under $30 million in the original budget, and the amended budget is showing just under $33 million. That's an additional $3.1 million in revenue. The original budget for instructional staff, we anticipated a reduction of 3 FTEs. This amended budget is a reduction of 6. During last year and this year, there were ECEA retirements and voluntary terminations of 15. That is extremely high for what we have experienced in the past. I'm also showing you that we had new grant non-union positions put in place this year of 11. These are being paid out of the Corona relief funds, the $1.4 million. I will identify when these are showing up in later slides. Healthcare, MESA increase in the original budget was anticipated at a 4.07% increase. This increase is based off of a 5-year trend. It's an average that I'm using. When the increases came in, they were half that. They were 2.05. Next slide. So moving on to student levels, with the close relationship between student levels, revenues, and budgeted expenditures, I'd like to track how the district does to budgeted student levels to actual. Pupil decreases reflected in the actual budget is the change from the previous spring count to the fall count of the current year. So let's look at a 5-year history of the budgeted to actual enrollment. The table presented in the lower left of the screen is beginning with the 16-17 school year and providing data through the current 2021 school year. While historical data is important to analyze, my focus is primarily on the current 2021 year. We predicted the fall count to be 3,867 with actual enrollment of 3,812. That's an additional loss of 55 students. And even though our predictions are slightly off target for the year, the data still reminds us of an overall continuing declining trend. Overall, on a 5-year average, the district is 99% accurate and slightly conservative. However, even a slight variance in student levels can be a big difference on revenue. Next.
Can I ask a question there?
Sure.
On the students, this would be for Suzanne. Did most of the decrease come from kindergartner, or is it spread throughout?
The 55 decrease that we experienced on top of what we were expecting was spread out over K through 12 students. In our young fives and our kindergarten, those added together total 254 students, which is about what we're predicting per class moving forward. So to answer your question, it was spread out over all grades K through 12.
Do you anticipate next year some of those kids coming back? Maybe they decide to homeschool rather than doing virtual?
Yes, we're hoping so.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks.
So moving on to instructional staffing levels, I previously stated that staffing accounts for 87% of budgeted expenditures. So it's important to adjust instructional levels relative to student levels. The information provided in this slide is based on full-time equivalencies or FTEs of instructional staffing. Here again is a 5-year history. Actually, there's 6 years. I take that back. Of budgeted to actual. Beginning with the 15-16 school year through the current 2021, there were slight variances in budgeted instructional staffing to actual. As you can see for the current school year, we have to, and actually there's a rounding. You might have picked this up in some of it's just about 2.5 because a lot of our instructional staffing isn't always a full FTE. It can be a 0.6, it can be a 0.8. So it's just about 2.5 less permanent instructional staffing. So the variances in staffing levels are usually reflective of student levels. However, this year looks differently. Our virtual instruction environment is requiring a modified approach. And this is where we had added 11 new positions, which are not reflected in this data because they are grant positions. And when the funding is exhausted, these positions will fall off. Does that seem clear to everybody? So this is basically reflective of our union or full-time position per minute. And then I also provide you this information visually in a graph. The dark blue bars reflect budgeted levels and the red reflect actual levels. Next slide, please. Okay, the SuperBlend-Pupil membership calculation. The left side of the screen is representing the regular membership blend that is used in calculations for the original budget. The membership blend is calculated by using 10% of the February 2020 count and 90% of this October's count. So the original budget was based on a membership blend of 3,875 students. The reduced foundation allowance at 7,695 and the membership blend of the 3,875 calculated a foundation allowance at 29.8 million. The right side of the screen is the SuperBlend. And this is basically using 75% of the previous year's membership blend and 25% of the current membership blend. So with the SuperBlend, it's basically providing us funding for 70 additional students when they're calculating the foundation allowance. The newly calculated SuperBlend at 3,945 and the restored foundation allowance at 8,345. State aid revenue for the foundation allowance is now at 32.9 million, giving us the 3.1 additional revenue. I'm really not expecting this SuperBlend to be used next year, so we're going to have quite a hit when we're talking about the pupil blend for next year. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind next year. But that was a nice little bump for us this year. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the budget changes summarized. As a reminder, this is a typical layout that I've provided you for some time. The fiscal year 1920 resulted in revenues exceeding expenditures by 379,000, leaving us with fund balance at 10.82% of total expenditures. The fiscal year 2021 original budget, we were anticipating expenditures to exceed revenues by just over $2 million and leaving us with 5.81% of fund balance to total expenditures. However, board policy, it has a minimum of 7%. So when you adopted the budget, the anticipated fund balance level was 7.04%. And then at the end of the fiscal year, fund balance level will alter the fund balance percentage because it's the beginning fund balance that will change. So I've added this column in yellow just to remind you, when you adopted the budget, you did adopt it with the anticipation it was just over 7%. But when the actuals came in, it modified that calculation. So the original budget is now, it was reflecting a 5.81%, which is below our board, technical board policy. Is there any questions on what I'm showing you with what you adopted and how it was recalculated? Okay. This proposed amended budget is now anticipating revenues to exceed expenditures and adding to the fund balance of 605,000 and leaving us with an 11.81% fund balance to budgeted expenditures. Revenues increased by 4.7 million, and expenditures also increased by just over 2 million. And as a benchmark, even though this budget version is reflecting a comfortable fund balance for the district, when you look at 18-19 data, the average for all districts in Michigan is 14.8%, and similar districts, their average is at a 13.2. So that is a comfortable level for us from what we've seen in a while, but as a reminder, it is lower than what the averages are for the state. Next slide, please. Moving on to look at our revenues in greater detail. This data, I always start with the actual from the last year as the beginning, a mark for us. And then I'm providing you the fiscal year 2021 budget and the amended. I just really want to focus on the change in revenue from the original budget to the amended budget for this year. And beginning with local source revenue, the amended budget has a decrease of just under $4 million. And this is related to the adjusted taxable values for the ETE plant that came off of commission. This will be changing in the future. Suzanne and myself, we attended the meeting. This is going to increase over over the next coming years. However, it's not impacting the state aid payments that we're receiving. It's just impacting the amount of money we're receiving through local taxes for the state aid. The revenue from the state source increased by 7.1 million. And the upper table is displaying the state revenue on greater depth. Foundation allowance net of taxes was adjusted by $7,024,739. This was due to decreased taxable value and more foundation allowances received through state revenue. The NIPSERS 147A was decreased by $349,312, and this is representing a state funding. This state appropriation is offsetting a portion of the retirement contributions owed by the district for the current fiscal year. So that was quite a drop in funding that we had received this year from last year. You know, they gave us like, they restored the foundation allowance and they gave us $65 per student, but they did hit our retirement funding. So that was quite a drop. The MIPSERS 147A was decreased. I'm sorry, the MIPSERS 147C was increased by $407,147. This funding represents a funding source to provide fiscal relief for districts' unfunded retirement obligation. And this is the category that has the net effect on fund balance that is zero, as both the revenues and the expenditures are recorded equally. Other state aid and grant revenue was increased just under 18,000, and that's what's making up the 7.1 million increase in these state sources. So moving back to the table on the left side, federal revenue was increased by $1.6 million. This is where the ESSER, the CARES funds of $324,000 is being reflected, and also that $1.4 million for the Corona relief funds. And the other revenue that was slightly adjusted for the PA 18 funding received from RESA, there actually was a slight decrease. Any questions on the revenue? You guys all good? Next slide. Expenditures. Okay, we're going to review the changes in the district's expenditures by type. Same format that I've used in the past. I'm providing you where we ended in 1920. That's the second column. That was our final. I'm also providing you with the original budget and the adopted budget. But here again, I'm just focusing on the change from the original to the amended budget. Salaries were reduced by 116,000. This includes the 15 ECEA retirements and voluntary terminations, and the 11 added grant-funded virtual instructional positions. Benefits were increased by 615,720. And then benefits, you know, just like the revenues, I like to break them apart because there's a lot going on in benefits. And you can't see the whole picture if you just look at the one line. So I want to transition our focus over to that before we move on. FICA and retirement, it was adjusted by just under 95,000. And this is relative to increased salary levels, to changes in salary levels and effective rates. Now, if you look at that previous graph, you could see a reduction in salaries, but then you're seeing an increase in retirement and FICA rates. And so what happens with like some employees, like senior employees, they are deferring a lot of money into the retirements, and that helps us save on FICA contributions. So the newer employees, they have like the full FICA burden at the 7.65. So you'll see a direct change with that benefit. And also the retirements, they don't have the older retirement plans. The newer ones are a little bit more expensive for us. So you have all those different changes with the plans and the effective rates. The group term life and life insurance, very small increase of $7,474. Now the health insurance, they were adjusted to reflect the district's rate change that's effective January 1st. I originally told you that the original budget was based off an increase of a 4.07% increase. However, and then actual rates coming in at 2.05, all these savings were eliminated through the 11 grant positions. It kind of absorbed all those savings. And we had, there was many employees who had to alter their coverage levels from opting out to the full benefit package. All their changes in their spouse's employment caused them to make their changes. So that also impacted the potential savings. MIPSTER's 147C was adjusted, increased at just over 400,000, same as the revenue from the previous slide. And there was a slight decrease to other benefit payments at just under $18,000. And that was all those different components are making up the $615,720 change. So transitioning back to the primary expenditure table, purchase services are increased by $260,204. This is mainly attributed to the increase in the custodial services relative to COVID sanitation, and these are all provided by the federal Corona Relief Funds. Supplies and repairs are also adjusted quite a bit by just over $500,000. This is reflecting PPE, cleaning supplies and equipment, and this is also funded by the Corona Relief Funds. There is no change in our capital budgeting. That stays the same. The other expenditure category was slightly increased by $6,450. And then the last line, which was new to us in the original budget, it was the reduction of the $750,000, and that was an area that was to be determined. We didn't know exactly where those savings were going to have to be cut from, but it's no longer necessarily in the amended budget because the foundation allowance was restored and we received all the funding and with the SuperBlend. So we didn't have to work any farther to eliminate that. So in total, expenditures were adjusted by a total of $2,022,042. Is there any questions on expenditures? Okay, moving on to the last slide for the night.
Pat, I think Pat has a question, but she's on mute. Pat, you have to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Tina, can you go back to slide 11, the previous slide for a minute, please?
Revenue?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. No problem. I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fund balance history. It's always good to keep an eye on where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So beginning back with the 2004-2005 through the 2019-20, all of these years are representing the actual results. The 2021 OB as adopted, it's displayed in yellow, just to show that that's the budget that was adopted and what we are anticipating. Then the next line for the 2021, where we are missing our budgeted mark by just under 500,000, the 2021 original budget balance is now adjusted to a 5.81%. And then fortunately, with the amended budget, we are anticipating fund balance levels just under 5 million and with a fund balance level 11.81% of total expenditures. But with this chaotic environment, things are changing so fast. It's requiring constant monitoring, operational adjustments. The final budget will capture all this year's activities, and hopefully next year we're going to be working with some normalcy. But that concludes my summary of the general fund amended budget. I am open to any questions at this time.
Does anybody have any questions? Tina, I know that part of your presentation, at least on my end, came out a little bit garbled. So I just kind of want to make a mention to the rest of the board. If you have questions after tonight's presentation, we don't vote on this until next month, as is typically our policy. So I'd say, just forward your questions if you don't think of them right this minute, and we can get them answered between now and then.
Absolutely.
No
Tina-
question. Lynn has a question? Or Karen?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, sorry.
First of all, thank you. You did an excellent job. But most of what you talked about was done with money that is done electronically or checks or credit card. But like student activities, that deals with a lot of cash with kids. What system do we have in place now to eliminate students having to bring in money for tickets and whatever supplies they have to pay for or whatever?
That's actually a very good question. So each year we're making improvements on this, but currently what we have in place, we have e-funds that works through the Skyward program, where students who participate in certain activities, whether it be pay to play or even some fundraising or parking permits. So that information is put into Skyward, and the ability for students and parents to pay is encouraged through the eFunds program. So each year, our cash payments and our checks are going down, and more payments are being received electronically. The district actually absorbs the cost for a e-check, so there is no cost for that transaction. If the payer participates in the credit card fee, they do absorb those costs themselves. Something else that we are just putting in place, I believe it's called GoFan. Don't quote me on that,
Yes,
but
GoFan.
it's where all activities with tickets, they will purchase the ticket electronically online, so that will eliminate any gate fees, people collecting fees at the gates, and then all that money is electronically deposited. So with each year, we have new opportunities, and we are reducing the cash collections and increasing the electronic collections.
All right, thanks. That sounds great.
Any other questions for Tina? Okay, Tina, thank you so much for your presentation. And I think you're up again with our next item on bond sale and bus purchase. There you are.
Okay. So as everyone may recall, a bond was passed in 2014 for $2.8 million to purchase buses. The initial plan was to purchase 5 buses for 5 years, so a total of 25 buses. We are approaching our 6th year of bus purchases, including the 2020 proposed purchase of 3 buses. The district has purchased a total of 26 buses for $2.51 million. And it's right now, after this purchase, we'll have an approximate remaining fund balance of $318,000. This remaining fund balance, it's planned to purchase 2 to 3 buses, and it can be in the 2022 or the 2023 year. Now, there's a bond requirement that you have to use 85% of your bond proceeds within the first 3 years. So we are required to make a bus purchase by the end of this June to fulfill this requirement. And when I said that the bus purchase of 2 to 3 for the next 2022 or 2023, it'll depend on our need, because we haven't used our buses to the extent last year, and then a little bit less for this year. So it might postpone our need for a bus or 2 buses in the next year. But we are under the requirement to spend up to the 85% by this June. So the district continues to use the MSBO Build a Bus. It's a cooperative purchasing program where we receive competitive bids. We receive them from Hoekstra, Holland, and Midwest Transit. The Midwest Transit provided a bid price for a transit international buses at a unit price of $107,769. Although the Midwest Transit was not the actual lowest price, it is maintaining at a cost responsible. It's the same type of bus that provides us consistency for maintenance and repair and parts. If you recall a few years ago, Larry Strunk had approached the board and summarized the importance of keeping the same type of bus and the monies that he saves by a uniform type of bus. So therefore, for approval at your January board meeting, administration is recommending the purchase of 3 8889 Transit International buses with equipment storage for a total bus purchase of $323,307 from Midwest Transit.
So Tina, that savings is realized through maintenance and repairs because all the vehicles are the same manufacturer, make, model, that sort of thing, correct?
That is correct.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tina about the buses?
What were the number? You said something about 88, 89. Was that how many passengers?
Yes, that's the passenger, yes, level. Where last year our last purchase, they were 77 passenger. They kind of switched that up, and right now, due to the lack of drivers, and they want to utilize the larger buses, they can put more students in and requiring less drivers.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Tina. Okay, so we'll move on to the St. Clair High School pool heater replacement bid with Kurt Grzelka. Kirk, are you here? Kirk? There, I see he's on.
Mm-hmm.
His microphone is off.
Somebody needs to send him a nudge.
I'm doing that now. Kirk is saying his mic is on. So Craig Headley, is there a way that you can unmute him?
His mic is showing on in the system.
Okay.
Kurt, check your, if you're on your Chromebook up in the upper right, make sure it's not, the mic is not muted. You might need to exit the meeting and re-enter real quick too.
Okay, so do we want to skip down to item E, Neola board policy update, and then we can come back to Kirk?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so that would be Suzanne.
Sure. So tonight I have one Neola policy. This is the first read. As is our board policy, you have 1 month where you read through the new, either new policy or amended policy, and then it'll be for approval at the next meeting. So this one is on Title IX, and this is updated language for the East China School District board policies based on state and federal regulations, legislations that have been passed. This is something that is a required adoption. We don't have the choice as to whether or not we're going to adopt it. But what we do have choice in is some of the language that I've outlined for you in your summary. So for policy 2266 Title 9, for the board meeting, I'm just going to read the summary. The U.S. Department of Education released new regulations implementing Title IX, the federal law that prohibits sex-based educational discrimination in schools receiving federal financial assistance. Schools are still responsible for appointing a Title IX coordinator and for promptly and equitably investigating incidents for sex-based discrimination, including sexual harassment. But now, Title IX investigations are subject to a plethora of standards and procedures that differ markedly from those recommended in previous federal guidance and case law. The three areas that are seeing the most change are outlined here in your summary. It's on the definition of sexual harassment. It's on the clarification on actual knowledge and the expansion of actual knowledge. And most importantly, for the district is the investigative procedures. So all of the summaries for each one of those three areas where most of the changes to this policy have occurred are summarized for you, but the overall is in the investigative procedures that we're responsible for here at the district. And mainly it divvies up the responsibility so that not one person is responsible for the investigation of an accusation of sexual discrimination. It's parceled out to other parties. Any questions on the Title IX? It'll be for your approval or as an action item at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, do we have Kirk back? Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you very much. Sorry, nobody had any questions, correct? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
hi, Kirk. Yes, there you
hi.
are.
I'm sorry about the technical difficulties there.
No problem. So you're up. St. Clair High School pool heater replacement bids. If you wanted to go over that with us, please.
Yep. So we put out the two bids for the St. Clair High School pool heater and for the roof over the Marine City Gym. The reason that these were put out was because of the immediate needs. Basically, they were so bad that they couldn't wait till next spring. So in conjunction with AUK and TMP, we put out the bids for these two projects. We received the bids like last week or so. We conducted the post-bid meetings with the three lowest bidders for both projects. Fortunately for us, the lowest responsive bidder for both projects was qualified and is what is being recommended by AUK and by myself after doing the complete review. So I'm asking for the board approval to go ahead and award these two projects. The St. Clair High pool heater replacement is the recommendation is to award it to A&F Water Heater. They were the lowest bidder and they are a company that I have worked with in the past. We're asking to award that contract in the amount of $57,246. That's a complete pool heater replacement, including the installation, all the new ductwork, all the mechanical hookup, basically a complete package. As far as the roofing bid goes, again, the lowest bidder was interviewed and is being recommended for that roof replacement. This is just over the gymnasium section of the Marine City High School itself. We're recommending that that contract be awarded to KJP Roofing and Sheet Metal Company in the amount of $91,475. So if there's any questions.
Hey, Kirk, what's the time frame on getting those projects completed once if they're approved?
Barring the board approval, we'll probably get started on the pool heater within about a week or so.
Okay.
And then the roof replacement is going to be, anywhere from a week to a number of weeks. We've got some built-in requirements in the specifications as far as temperatures and conditions in which we will allow the roof to be installed on. That's
Okay.
to ensure a quality roof replacement. So it has to be a certain temperature for a certain amount of hours. So we will be getting that one done, of course, as soon as we can, given weather conditions. I'm hopeful though that, within the next few weeks to a month that we can get that done.
Okay. Thanks, Kirk.
Kirk, how old is the St. Clair High School pool heater?
Oh, it predates my time, so I would guess at least 8 or 10 years.
Okay.
And the problem with that one is that it actually used the air for combustion from inside the room in which it was operating, where there was other equipment and an air handler. And the one that we are replacing it with is one that has a separate fresh air intake from the outside, and it's got a separated heat exchanger. So we're replacing it with a substantially better unit that should have a much longer life cycle than the one that was put in there.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Kirk, this might be a silly question, but I'm assuming that the replacement heater is going to be compatible with all the other new components that the pool's going to get through the bond updates?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we able to use bond money for these projects now, or?
Yes, they are both, they were both budgeted for and in the bond. When it went out, we basically just pulled these two projects a little bit forward because of the immediate need. But they actually came in a little bit under what they were budgeted for in the bond allocation. So we're in good shape.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay, any other questions for Kirk? Thanks, Kirk.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move on to F, bond update. Suzanne? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. If you can remember back to March 10th, before COVID, we this community supported East China school districts with the passage of a bond. It seems like a lifetime ago. And through COVID, the school district and our architect and our construction company, we've all been working with COVID-related situations within the organizations, but we have been able to move forward, maybe not quite as fast as we would have under normal circumstances, but we are moving forward. And like Kirk Rosalko just presented, we're able to do some of these pull-ahead projects where there's immediate needs. We're also able to purchase Chromebooks for the virtual learning that we need to move forward. So even though on March 10th, our communities supported this bond to support East China School District in the future, they didn't realize how quickly the future was going to change for us. And without these bond proceeds, without us being able to shore up our infrastructure where we need to and purchase the technology that we need to, that bond presentation, that budget presentation that we just watched would be dramatically different. So again and again, East China School District wants to thank our community for their support and giving us the ability to operate in the most efficient manner possible under these really difficult circumstances and moving forward. So I mentioned the two pull-ahead projects, the Marine City gym roof and the pool heater, the purchase of the Chromebooks. But the first project up is the Innovation Center. And it's a 32,000 square foot classroom addition at the Meisner campus. With these additional classrooms, 4 new STEM labs, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, a collaborative feel and state-of-the-art instructional technologies. The East China Innovation Center is going to be full of potential and endless possibilities for all of our students. It's going to provide innovative areas for our students to learn in content areas that we know we have now and in areas we're not even aware of and planning for in the future. The design process for the Innovation Center as to date has included tours to similar facilities. This morning we were at Port Huron, STEAM Labs, and looking at some other bond renovations. We have done workshops and planning meetings. So the Innovation Center, being the first project that is in our bond timeline, is underway. The next two projects that are in line are the Marine City 612 building. The design process has just begun on the anticipated transformation of the existing Marine City 612 building. Improvements emphasizing instructional technology, energy efficiency, safety, and security will be prioritized to enhance educational opportunities for all of our students. Design is anticipated to extend through the third quarter of 2021. The other project that's working simultaneously with the Marine City 612 campus is the St. Clair 612 campus. And the existing St. Clair High School has begun in its design process as well. An equitable operational structure of combining the middle school and high school to create an integrated St. Clair 612 building will be prioritized. Improvements emphasizing instructional technology, energy efficiency, again, that safety and security are being developed to enhance educational opportunities for all of our students. Design for the St. Clair campus will proceed through the fourth quarter of 2021. So moving forward through our bond process so that everybody is as up to date as possible of where we are in the plans that are being made, each week in the East China School District newsletter, there will be a one-page summary of bond updates. And in the weekly board update, there will also be a one-page summary of the bond updates so that everyone can see where we're at and how we're moving forward through this planning process. There's a lot of detail and planning work that both Kirk and Craig have been a part of as our Director of Operations and Director of Technology. And we've also held a meeting in July with teachers from both the St. Clair and Marine City campuses and Riverview East met here at central office to talk about planning for the Innovation Center. Because while the buildings and the efficiencies that they're going to create are outstanding for East China School District, we know that it's the programming and the teachers that will be in these spaces that's going to make the difference. So we want everyone to be a part of this exciting planning process for East China School District. Are there any questions that I can answer regarding the updates to the bond and how often they'll be received? Like I said, we're going to be starting, I'm holding the first one in my hand, and it will be included in the weekly newsletter and as well as the board update, and will be provided weekly moving forward.
No questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, our next item is the extended continuity of learning plan update.
Yep,
Ma'am?
thank you. Craig, I believe you have my slides for the Return to Learn presentation.
Should be just about ready.
Thank you. Okay, so today's Return to Learn update is the monthly update as required for the December 14th East China School District Board of Education meeting. On the next slide, what I wanted to do is just kind of remind us where these updates came from and why we're hearing them each month. So the COVID-19 Preparedness and Response Plan was approved by the East China School District Board of Education at the August 10th Board of Education meeting. Then on August 20th, the governor signed House Bill 5913 into law as Public Act 149 that now requires districts to provide for instruction under an extended continuity of learning plan. If you remember back in March, our bond passed on the 10th, and then March 13th, we were at the stay home emergency where we were told to go home. We had to create a learning plan. This is the extended continuity or extended COVID learning plan that we needed to have approved by our RESA. So this extended continuity of learning plan does not replace that COVID-19 preparedness and response plan that was approved on the 10th, but it requires additional assurances and requirements from the school district. So then those were adopted by RISA and become part of the preparedness plan that was approved by our board on the 10th. One of those requirements in the extended continuity of learning plan is this return to learn update. And in the return to learn update are particulars that we have to include, including attendance. So on the next slide, I just wanted to review where we are. So our current mode of instruction is 100% virtual. And for 9th through 12th grade, reminding you that that began on Wednesday, November 18th, due to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services order requiring 9th through 12th grade to be virtual. And then for our pre-K through 8th graders, that began on Monday, November 30th, after that Thanksgiving break. So the key health metrics that we continue to pay attention to and analyze from the St. Clair County Health Department are on the next slide. And just like last month in the update, I want to show month to month what the metrics are looking like for our county. So the data that was presented at our last board meeting on November 23rd had our county positivity rate at 15.4 and the average number of new COVID cases per day in our county at 111. Now, the most recent data, as of last Friday, 11/20, the percent of positive tests are now 18.4, the average number of new cases per day at 117. On the right-hand side of the slide, I have just the weekly trend data for those positive cases, the positivity rate as it's called in St. Clair County. So you can see from 11/20 was a 15.4, 11/27, 11/9, 12/4 was 15.5, and then 12/11, or the beginning of this week, 18.4. Now, the superintendents for St. Clair County continue to meet on a weekly basis on Tuesday. So our meeting for this week will be tomorrow morning. On the next slide is the required update on our attendance, which is now defined as two-way interaction. And you'll see there through the weeks, we did have the 1 week with no school for Thanksgiving. But other than that, a very strong percentage of students attending or having those two-way interactions in their classrooms. On the final slide, I just want to review the metrics and share the goal for East China School District moving forward. So our current metrics, our interaction and attendance percentage rates, they continue to be strong even as we transitioned to that virtual learning environment. The positivity rates in St. Clair County are currently very high at 18.4. In that extended continuity of learning plan that I referenced on the at the beginning of the presentation, I said there has to be additional assurances that the district agrees to. One of those assurances, assurance number 7, requires that the prioritization of in-person instruction for our students in grades K through 5. Keeping in mind the current MDHHS order that has our grades 9 through 12 remaining virtual. All of that considered, the goal of East China School District will be to work towards having grades pre-K through 5 return to in-person learning on Monday, January 11th of 2021, and grades 6 through 12 to return on January 19th, 2021. This goal will require East China School District administration to continue to watch the county positivity rates over the next 4 weeks and determine the feasibility of in-person instruction on an operational level. So with the current metrics, with the extended continuity of learning plan assurances that were required to adhere to, and the MDHHS order, this is the goal of East China School District, is to return our students to in-person learning as soon as we safely and operationally can do so. I think we demonstrated at the beginning of the school year how important in-person learning is for all of our students. And as soon as we're able to do that, within collaboration with the St. Clair County Health Department, we will do that. May I answer any questions?
If it remains at 18.4, will we stick to this plan, or what does it have to be down to before we go back?
There isn't, that's a great question, Karen, but there isn't one number that you would look to, because the variables are, there are many variables that go into consideration as to whether or not we're able to come back. And of course, we'll need to see a decrease in the positivity rate for our county in order to make that consideration, because at 18.4 it's too high. But we don't want to put a specific positivity rate number on that. Like I said, we meet with the health department and we have a wonderful collaborative relationship. And we listen to what they say and how they guide us in making these decisions. We also need to make sure that operationally we can return to in-person learning.
And how are the students doing online? I realize we've only had a week or so, but you know, you read it in California that so many kids are failing. I mean, we've got such a high attendance rate. It would seem to me that the kids are keeping up, or.
Well, I think we have a lot of things working in our advantage. We were able to get 11 solid weeks of in-person instruction for our students starting on September 8th. That laid a wonderful foundation for our students as they now that they've transitioned to a virtual environment. Many students did not have that time in the classroom to create the relationships with the students so we have that advantage. We also, like I said, with the passing of our bond, have the ability to purchase the technology to keep us where we need to be, and many districts are struggling with that technology piece. And to Craig Headley's credit, he had those Chromebooks ready to go and purchased, and many districts are still waiting for them to be delivered. So a lot of things have worked in our advantage to get us to a good spot.
And then the high schools are still open for kids to go in?
All of our buildings have learning labs so that if students need support, they're able to come in and receive support.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So when we,
Suzanne?
sorry, go ahead, Pat.
No, go ahead, Todd. That's okay.
All right. When we went to virtual at the time, the last board meeting, you had said we had 150 to 200 daily people who are quarantined, staff and students. Are
Yep.
we able to keep track of that still now that people are not in? Because that'll be another factor to consider, right, for our return. And
yes,
are we able to keep track of how many students are quarantined even though they're not in school?
we no longer have that information as far as who would be quarantined, because we're not doing the contact tracing with them not being in our buildings. But you're right, Todd, that's one of the variables that would need to be considered before we'd be able to return to the in-person instruction.
Suzanne?
Yes, Pat?
Back, oh, stop. Back on the one slide about the most recent information. I think there's just a typo. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not a typo. Can you go back? Craig, could you go back to that? No, this, oh, daggone it. Where is it? Oh, right here, where you said the most recent data as of 8/30/11/2020. Is that supposed to say like just last Friday?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if it's going to make any big deal, but the information above it says 11/2020. And I'm sure. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Pat, or Mrs. Bbuck. That should have been changed. As the updates come out every Friday.
Yeah.
So our health department, I can't give them enough credit for the job that they have done during this pandemic. Every single Friday, they release 4 pieces of information that help not only school districts, but community businesses, make decisions, and families make decisions. So that should be reflective of last Friday. And we'll get the new numbers, this Friday. So thank you.
Okay, you're
Mhm.
welcome.
Any other questions?
Is one of the factors that you will be considering whether or not, I'm sure you're looking at trends, right? Because we don't also want to go back to in-person and then have to go back to remote and then go back to in-person and back to remote. So I'm assuming that's something that's being considered in those discussions.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the reasons that the data is pointing to us waiting until January 11th and then January 19th before considering to return to in-person learning. Because I do think, even though we want to be in person as soon as we safely can, that getting some consistency right now is important instead of changing schedules because it is a dramatic change for staff and for families.
Okay, is there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
All right, so now we will then move on to our action items. We have 3 action items this evening. The first is the summer tax collection from last month's presentation. A motion is needed for this recommended action. Per administration's recommendation, the Board of Education approves the resolution for summer tax collection as presented at the November 23rd, 2020 meeting. Excuse me.
So moved.
Support.
Do I have a second?
Yes, support.
Mike.
Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Is Amy still with us?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Okay, there you go. There you are. I see you now. Okay. The next recommended action is per administration's recommendation. The Board of Education approves the bid by A&F Water Heater, Inc. in the amount of $57,246 for the replacement of the pool heater at St. Clair High School.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, any comments or questions? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carries. And then our last action item is per administration's recommendation. The Board of Education approves the bid for KJP Roofing and Sheet Metal, Inc. in the amount of $91,475 for the replacement of the Marine City High School gym roof.
So moved.
Support.
Any comments or questions about the roof bid? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, all right, that motion also carries. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. Next meeting, we'll have the action item to approve the 2020-21 revised budget that Tina presented this evening, and it's also Board of Education recognition. So again, I want to thank all the board members for your hard work and wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and we are adjourned.